When great customer experience is anchored in insight, psychology, and strategy, something special happens. Today's guest is Liz Pinfold Reed, a global experienced CX strategist, founder of Good CX in Auckland, and known for her work across 5 continents, helping brands turn data, human-centered design, and storytelling into exceptional customer journeys. From her early years, mapping personas for BMW and working at agencies like BBDO, Proximity and Havas in London, to advising brands such as Visa and Dove, Liz now focuses on helping organizations align brand, experience and emotion to create connection and trust. In a world where AI, automation and process dominate headlines, Liz reminds us that the human heart of CX is still the difference maker. Welcome to the Kiwi CX Collective, Liz Pinfold Reed.
Hey Elias, it's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you here. Liz, for some of our audience members who may not have met you before, can you just share a little bit about your journey into the CX world and how you've arrived to where you are today?
Sure, it's been a little bit of a wobbly path. I started out, my natural talents are probably in kind of storytelling, and when I was at university I went on down that marketing path, but also had like a little arts degree tacked on the side. And to be honest, if I say what do I use most these days, well actually it's probably my history and my English degree, because I'm really interested in popular culture and how people think and feel. But through my career, I've had a lot of work in comms, lots of things, including everything from events to then eventually becoming a data planner, which seems very disconnected. But at the heart of it, well, we need to understand who we're talking to. We need to be hyper-personalized. And when we start looking at data planning, which is now bringing us to kind of our future state where we now have AI, it's really important that we think about who we're talking to, what's going to move them, how they're feeling, and how we can remove friction or add delight. And so now I have my own consultancy, which is called Good CX, and some other surprise things that are going to be popping up later. But we do a lot in the innovation space and solution architecture.
Well, I love the fact that you talk about storytelling. So now I believe you've got some young children, is that correct?
I do. I've got like a little 7 and a 10-year-old.
Oh, 7 and 10-year-old. I know that my eldest now 35, 32, 23 and 24. So I'm a little bit further ahead in the journey than yourself. But can you remember when your kids were a bit young, maybe aged about 5 or 6, and you were tucking them into bed and they looked up at you and they said, "Mummy," or "Daddy," they say, "Share some statistics." Oh, no, that's right. They don't say that. They say, "Tell us a story." Yeah. I think storytelling is really in the heart of our DNA as humans. We need to understand how to be storytellers and how to understand the story of a customer experience as well. So you've been involved now for a number of years within the customer experience center, started off out of data and data analytics into storytelling. What does CX mean to you?
Yeah, I like to think of it as an equation. Okay. So if we take C, well, C is customer, of course, but I like to think of it as one very special person.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to really connect with that one person in a way that makes them feel seen and heard and understood, because it's a biological imperative. Without that, we can't survive. Now let's go to the X. X, obviously it stands for experience, but it's not just one experience. It's every single tiny little experience that one individual person has with your brand, and that over time, that adds up. So when we have a consumer and they're starting to engage with brands, or if they're engaging with employees, and on the converse, employees engaging with consumers, what we're doing is we're having these kind of micro moments, and all of those micro moments really count. So that raises some questions. How do we make sure our content is relevant and timely and addresses the unmet need, that human-centered design of that individual person in that moment, which with AI, of course, there's so many opportunities now. But if we don't stop and step back and think about them in the scheme of their own lives, as opposed to trying to sell them stuff, which is, traditional marketing, we're gonna miss a beat. So when we're looking and scaling customer experience, I'm going to give you another equation. And this one is one that hopefully you've probably come across before, which is E plus R equals O. Event plus reaction equals outcome.
Yeah.
And what can we affect here? Well, what we can do is we can start to look at how we can shape the nervous system of the customer in a way that supports them and meets them where they're at, and create like great experiences and brave spaces and safe enough spaces for them to be able to engage to get the solution to their unmet need in a way that gives them a great outcome. So that's kind of a couple of little takeaways there.
That's brilliant takeaways. I like that. E plus R equals O. Event plus reaction equals outcome. And that's so true. Now, I know that you were chairing the CX stream about a week ago at the 7th Future CX Summit. AI, I think that must have been the most overused acronym in the whole 2 days that both of us were there. Everybody's talking about AI, how it's being implemented, working it through. So when you look at CX and EX, both customer experience and employee experience, how does AI fit into the mix? And what trends, if any, are you seeing that you'd say, okay, let's take note of this?
Yeah, such a good question. I love AI, and one of the reasons I love AI is because it's suddenly like, I feel like I've been a sleeping dragon, emphasis on the dragon, but I'm beginning to feel like I'm kind of like being awoken again. The data planning is coming back to life.
Yeah.
And 15 years ago when I was in Asia and I was trying to encourage brands that they might need something like a single customer view, I had some quite senior people say to me, Liz, it's like you're making my brain bleed out of my ear. Because at the time, we were still selling, there was a lot of business that went through kind of billboards and, lots of TV advertising, and that's still very important, and that cross-functional mix is very important. But predictive analysis at the time was kind of something that people were still trying to get their heads around, understandably. Because when we get a new technology in place, naturally we have fear. What does this mean? Do I understand it? Am I going to ask the right questions? And it's all very well and glib to be like this kind of young whippersnapper at the time, kind of coming in saying, we should measure everything. And do you know what your data can do when we're challenging a system? But what we need to do is we need to bring in contributor safety. What I've noticed between the two Advantage CX summits is that last year, I could definitely feel more fear in the room. And this year, there was a noticeable shift where I think a lot of people had actually sort of like gone, okay, I'm going to jump in and I'm going to let's suck it and see what happens, right? And I think that is important, but we need to do it in a way where we take our employees along with us. And you'll be seeing that in the call center space as well, in contact center space, is that we need to make sure that employees particularly don't feel like they're going to be suddenly replaced by AI. That's not what we're trying to achieve here. What we're trying to do is create a space where thinking can start to bubble up. When we look at the nervous system, it's natural for us when we feel fear or fight and flight to go into mobilization. And when we're mobilized, what we want to do is we want to take action. But there's a way to take action, and there's a way to put some pause and thinking in and put some proper strategic planning in. Now, I said before that I love AI. Well, the reason that I love AI is because there are a lot of businesses, and in the small business space, this is really not a joke, where a lot of businesses are thinking, we don't need traditional tacticians or marketeers or even call center people to do the human task anymore. And then they're sort of trying to build something with AI and then wondering at the end why engagement is falling or effectiveness is falling. Well, that is actually down to the fact that the initial brief was either never written or incorrect. When you take that human interface out, there's no one left to blame but yourself. And so for me as a strategic planner, because in creative agencies and transformation agencies, my job is actually not to do, it is to think. It means that we're opening up the space where we're actually starting to settle into the need for thinking. Because from my perspective, AI is like a great big spotlight, which is showing where the gaps are. Now, once we actually start to look at the knowledge economy and realize it's no longer the Industrial Revolution, and that there's a possibility for humans to really start thinking and really starting being creative, and look at storytelling and people and emotions, now we're actually creating a new economy. Yes, it does mean that some jobs are going to have to shift, but I think ultimately what we're getting to is what I opened my stream of the summit with, and it's this. The biggest tool in AI in 2025, according to me, is a pencil.
Wow.
And so at the summit, I also spent the princely sum of $1.50 on 5 pencils, $1.50 each, in American dollars, by the way. Nearly had to take out a mortgage because of the exchange rate. But when I took these pencils, I had 5. And they came from the New York Library. Why the New York Library? Because the New York Library is a place of thinking. The New York Library's treasure room has the characters from the original bears from Winnie the Pooh, one of the most beloved stories of all time. It's got the writing desk of Charles Dickens, someone who was able to see the human condition with empathy and compassion and write about it as a narrative that has served us, and those stories are still as real today as they were years ago. It has a scribbled out version of the Bill of Rights, which is all about thinking about what is the evolution of like making sure that we look after humans correctly. And it has a printed version of the Gutenberg Bible from the early revolution of the printing press. You know, like the internet was a huge evolution after the printing press, and now we've got AI. We need to look back to understand where we've come from, but we need to stop and think about what we're generating and where we're getting our ideas from, and collaborate and do this. Sit down, talk to each other, and spur new ideas. AI is fantastic and it has so much capability. It's like a Maserati, but I could drive it, or you could put a Formula One racer in it.
Yeah, true.
And there's a difference. And so the trick is, how do we skill our staff to drive Maseratis at F1, right? Wow. So I think there's some really cool opportunities, but what I was encouraging people to do with my 5 pencils was I awarded the 5 best questions that I heard, because I want people to fail forward. I want people to ask questions. I want them to encourage their team to be playful. In a mobilized state, we can fight or flight, or we can play. And this is some of the theory that I'm really interested in, the learning that I'm doing, which comes from polyvagal theory. And I've been doing my course with the Polyvagal Institute in America. I think that if we look at how we are evolving as humans and how AI is evolving, it's a huge and fascinating area that's going to open out a lot more fulfilling experiences.
So you've just shared an unbelievable treasure trove of ideas and concepts, and you threw out a couple of phrases here which really resonated with me. Both phrases, by the way, have come from a chap who's mentored me. His name is Dr. John C. Maxwell, and John wrote a couple of books. One was called Failing Forward,
nice.
Where he's encouraging us to, sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Yeah.
And we've got to learn when we do fail forward. And I hear, and it was only just the other day I heard a statistic that we have at least 80% and as high as 95% of AI projects do not deliver a return, which is shocking. But then the other thing that you also talked about, another book that John's written, is called Thinking for a Change.
Ah, nice.
Okay,
I love it.
Think for a change. So think for a change has double entendre. Number 1, think to create change.
Yes.
And number 2, just think. Because if you look at these implementations, you talked about fear. And there was certainly a year ago, a lot more fear, especially amongst the agents. And we've talked at many different levels about how do we keep them engaged on the journey and get them involved. These are people who are at the front end. Talk to me maybe about some of the psychology behind what's happening and how do we empower these agents, these frontline people, to help make the journey better, to help implement AI as a tool to enhance their work without burning them out or scaring them away.
Yeah. Look, I think this is actually probably one of the most important topics, and something that I've always admired about you is that you have so much depth of knowledge on leadership. And something we've also talked about in the past is that any change that's going to happen within an organization has to come from leadership.
Yeah.
And where I work in that space is working with especially founders and senior leadership teams who are actually people who are ready to, they're great thinkers and they've got great ideas, but they're actually looking to kind of stress test and soundboard and challenge their own thinking. And that takes a certain type of individual. Not everyone's open to that, but that type of person is kind of ready. They're on the cusp of really stepping into that kind of purpose change management zone. And that means that they really need to look at their own internal narrative and their own values, especially if, as a founder, it's something that they have built and baked into their business. But the business might be having some problems with scale because somewhere along the line that narrative needs to be reassessed and retold in a way that the business can move forward. In a corporate environment, this might mean that there's been changes on a senior leadership team and there's a lack of alignment. When there is a lack of alignment within the leadership team, there's no plan for the employee experience. And also, if the leadership is in a state of mobilization or even freeze, and they're not in a connected space, the most important thing is that they can't read the room. So one of the things that we've been talking about a lot is putting your own oxygen mask on first as a leader so that you can kind of have this idea, and I call it embodied leadership. That when I come into myself and when I check in with myself and I see what energy I'm bringing to the room, and I kind of use some neural exercises, and those might be breath or vision exercises, and I've got a whole toolkit, which is the type of thing that I'm really focusing on teaching not only leaders but also students right now. When we do things like help people open their peripheral vision or decelerate their heart rate with the breath, when we do things like bring our social engagement system on through the afferent nerves that come up through the ventral vagus, when I am present and when I can really see and listen to what's going on in the team, I can start to see any members of the team who are actually needing to be brought to the center and supported. It's not about changing their behavior, it's about meeting them where they're at and establishing what toolbox they need to make them feel safe enough to build a brave space to start by turning up, avoiding things like absenteeism and presenteeism, but also making sure that they feel seen, heard, and understood. The same thing we talked about at the beginning. So when we do things in a preventative style to make sure that we're doing things like protecting staff from, difficult call situations or, like abusive call situations, we can look at how we build and design, and we put that human-centered design into things like call scripts. But then at the end, we work with partners who can also sort of do that kind of ambulance at the cliff type of thing. And I know you're going to talk to Debbie at some point in time to also make sure that we are helping people settle their nervous system with someone in the business who they feel co-regulated with or who they can play with. I talked about that very important idea of play, and someone who is a great teacher of mine, Michael Allison, talks about the play zone. Something that I liked about looking at a model like the play zone is that it aligned with something I started to design last year, which is called innovation labs. The idea of an innovation lab is like actually getting teams out of the boardroom and away from a table and allowing them to mobilize after they've had a stressful conversation. When we're trying to solve problems, regardless of whether it's a consumer problem, a customer experience flow, an employee flow, it doesn't matter what the problem is. The most important thing is that we solve the right problem. But when there's fear in the room and people feel that maybe they're under attack and maybe they don't feel like they're being seen and heard, or they don't have psychological safety to be able to have a conversation where they can not only contribute but also challenge, which comes from the 4 Stages of Psychological Safety by Timothy R. Clark. When we don't have that contribution and challenge of safety, we don't actually cross the innovation threshold. And one of the reasons for that is because our blood flow is going to our hands and legs so that we can get the hell out of there. But when we trap people in a seat behind a chair in an office, they physically can't move. So one of the things that I do in my labs is that we try to unpack the problem that we need to solve, and we really stress test that problem in the morning. And then we go and do something playful. And that can be anything so long as I can bake neural exercises into it. It might be jumping on a paddle board and getting everyone to do some walker leadership so that they understand how they balance their canoe or walker. It might be putting them on a stage and helping them improvise and play out problems in a playful way with scenarios where they've got an extra person supporting them who voices the subconscious and talks about some of the things as the subconscious voice that we're thinking but we don't really say. Or it might be doing some Iyengar or some contemporary movement practices, or even playing some golf or something, where it's structured in a way that people begin to be able to have a laugh, fail forward in a playful way, but in a setting that's not necessarily related to the business. But once they've shifted the physical energy and the blood flow's coming back up into their brain and their social engagement system is coming on through great eye contact and a melodious voice and all of those things that make us feel safe, just like I do with you, then I can talk. I can talk with a bit of vulnerability. I can talk with someone who has had to pull me out of the water potentially, and I now know I have a trust relationship with. And I can actually settle down into a conversation where some human truths come out. Because without the human truths, we are not going to be able to design in a human-centered way. We are not going to be able to think beyond ourselves, and we will get stuck in our ego. And so really what we want to do is start to create communities, and this idea of community as medicine, and someone who I love who talks about that is Dr. Nikki Elliott, bringing peer-to-peer communities together and people together who can switch and exchange ideas like we do.
So when you go peer-to-peer, I like that, because here at CCNNZ, we have really looked and we've spoken to our members, and they said the best way that we actually the best value we get is when we get involved with networking opportunities, meeting people, sharing these stories. We are now seeing a multicultural workforce that's multicultural, multi-generational. So a multi-generational workforce where some people entering the marketplace have had to conclude their schooling through COVID. Where the social interactions were not as easily found as we love. And we used to have, within the contact center industry, the opportunity of saying, oh, take the more basic calls, the simpler calls, which when you used to handle them, gave you a chance to build up your social skills. If you think about this multi-generational environment we're seeing ourselves in, and you think about how you're going to guide a leader in a team sport, because that's what CX is. I know Melanie just mentions that number of times. What is the advice you'd give a leader looking at a multi-generational, especially if they come from a process-driven environment, to then help them accomplish all the things you just mentioned to help remove that fear and that concern when AI comes and knocks on the door?
This is such an important topic. And over the last, 18 months, I've been spending a lot of time with people who are half my age. And frankly, I've learned so much from them. I think that sometimes we don't realize how much we can learn from having that intergenerational relationship. And one of the reasons why peers who are younger than us, and you're spot on, through COVID, were finishing off those pivotal years of high school at home, it definitely, if I think about who COVID actually affected the most, I actually do think potentially it was that age group, because they're such formative years. It's the years when they should be at school doing young enterprise and learning how to work as, work independently and come up with their own ideas, and also have that opportunity to really contribute and challenge. But it's also the time where they're starting to go out and get part-time jobs, go and do some waitressing in a cafe, or, go and do some car washing or things, and begin to really start to become a part of society outside of a structured environment. I know that the universities, they had a 5-year plan to try and recover students who have been learning in an online situation, have been sitting in 2 dimensions behind a computer. And I think that community is really missing for them. But I also think that as older generations, we've also missed some of their fantastic, just innovative thinking. And I'm the only person who's never seen the back of my own head, right? I've only ever seen myself in the mirror.
Yes.
And that's why when I see a photograph of myself, it looks wrong, because it's reversed.
Yeah.
So my perception of myself is wrong. In that I can only see that one side of myself. When I bring a variety of people in who see the world differently as well, the more I welcome that in with that idea of radical candor, the more I'm able to help them spot my blind spots. And so I've got a stack of fantastic interns who've come in, and they come in and out of different workshops, and I try and join them up, particularly with SMEs who wouldn't normally have the experience of working with small people. It's not really about my relationship with the student or the business when they're in that space. What's happening is you might be putting a 55-year-old with a 19-year-old, and then they go off and work together, and they come up with a whole new host of ideas. But also that younger person can make quick little fixes on technology because they're digital natives that can help you get over the speed bumps of upscaling your business if you are an older person who maybe you've been a tradie and you haven't been on a computer, and so but you've got a great successful trades business and you are needing to accelerate faster. So young people need to feel the success of what is naturally imbued within them. I had a 17-year-old in my one of my workshops about 3 weeks ago, and she just picked up her phone and did all the AI tasks intuitively. Everyone else was trying to work out how to use the AI. She's not scared of it. There's other things that she might be scared of, but she's not scared of the technology. She's vibe coding, right? And one of the things I talk to people about when they're starting to get on board with AI is turning dictation on. The more you can talk to it, the more you can have a story with it, tell a story to it, the more the human insights come out. So for a leader, getting close to your younger team, of course it's important, but you kind of got to roll your sleeves up. You've got to get out there with them. You've got to ask them how they see things differently. And you've got to have this idea, and the language that I use is this. When people are in my room, I say, come in and go strong and wrong.
Yep.
And it's something that many years ago, I had a beautiful singing teacher, and she used to say that when I was sight reading. Sight reading, as a singer particularly, is an awful thing to do because you just sound like a strangled budgie. But she used to just say, look, just do your best, and you're going to hit it right more than you're going to hit it wrong. But it's the only way to kind of run at it. Right? Now, so if we try starting an ideation process, particularly when you're going into things like rapid prototyping for AI, the more ideas that we throw out, the more ideas we can put on the whiteboard. What I find is that the truly innovative AI ideas are coming from the margins. It'll be something, someone will have a throwaway comment, or someone will mention something odd, and it's the needle in the haystack. But I often say when people are working with me, feel free to use this, that working with me is a bit like working with a raccoon in a trash heap. You know,
Okay.
I have to rifle through and throw all of the trash out in order to find something tasty to work with. It's a very uncomfortable process. And that's why only people who are open to challenge will like it.
So we talked about going strong and wrong.
Yeah.
We talked about failing forward.
Yeah.
We've talked about trying to innovate in these rapidly generated AI environments. Now, when you look at this and you say to yourself, okay, number one, I think the majority of successful implementations are those that have diverse groups in terms of age, sociographic, demographics, to come in and work through internal, external stakeholders coming through and driving that forward. But we still have an environment where as a business, usually the business owner is sitting there saying, well, I've still got to deliver a profit.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pressure being put onto the leaders to say, deliver something to us, but at the same time, keep your people safe. Give them that, what was the phrase, that contributor safety.
Yeah.
How do you empower somebody who has to apply this?
Yeah.
What advice would you give them to help them say, how do I carve out time to create? Because this sounds to me like a very important component of what they have to do every day.
Well, look, I think this comes back to your pencil, right? What's your plan? Like, when are you actually putting a plan in place to have some ideation, to get everybody on the same page about what you're trying to achieve, but do it in an unstructured manner? Like, do it in a place, in a way that people can move and feel safe enough to bring their ideas to the table. You in your reading and mine, there's so many stories about how an insight came out of a piece of information that was given by an employee who knew something but was never given a forum to talk.
Yeah.
Right? And, you know, like, I'm sure you could write a laundry list of examples. Generally, when we're trying to solve a problem and we don't know what the answer is, it's because we're not digging deep enough. And that's what I mean about being in the trash can.
Yep.
We've put all these layers, these institutional layers on, but we are missing things because we're so busy doing that we're not stopping to listen. And we've got to start listening to our people.
Yep.
You know, and like someone who I think you probably have read, Roger L. Martin, he's got his great book, I think it's called A New Way to Think. But he talks about how the best leaders, they still go out, you know, head of Procter & Gamble goes into a house, into a homeowner's house to see how the products are being used. Because there's something, it's like, you know, that classic Febreze case study where they were trying to crack, like they found that it was a reward. It wasn't that it got rid of odors, it's that people like clicking the button at the end to feel like they'd finished their cleaning. That comes from observing everyday life. Coming back to what I talked about at the beginning about why is my history degree the most important thing that I have? Because with a history degree, you get taught to shape a hypothesis and then stress test it. But also with history, popular culture is more important in the frame of history than kings and queens. How did everyday people live? We need to stop thinking about, you know, kind of like the big issues and think about everyday human truths. When we understand the everyday human truth, we can find that human truth and then we can amplify it in a way that has utility, but also in a way that makes people feel within the employee structure that they're working towards something purposeful.
Yep.
If we don't feel like we're going to work, and it doesn't matter what your job is, it doesn't matter if you're the CEO or the janitor, everyone needs to feel purposeful. The most important person in my business is the person who tidies up for me. She doesn't do tidying up, she gives me sanity, right?
Yeah.
It's like, we have to understand, in New Zealand, sometimes I think we can talk about the function of what we're selling and why we are selling it and not what it means to the consumer, and that meaning might flex. And so it's really about trying to bring ourselves back to the moment and have that presence. It's very, very much in that human-centered design space.
Well, I'm going to be drawing this conversation to a bit of a close. I'm going to try and summarize some of the many things I've heard you say. I think, number one, you've got to stop. So we've got AI being lauded in terms of the benefits it can deliver, and we know there are tons of benefits in the CX and the AI and the contact center environments. But if you are pressurized to deliver something just for the peer pressure, keeping up with the Joneses, let's say, you've got to stop, and then you've got to listen. And I love that, because you've got to listen to your people, and people without a purpose is going to lead to disaster.
Yeah.
But there's fear in the industry, probably less so than it was a year ago. But is there enough safety? That's the question we have to ask.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that there's, at a leadership level, there is a, right, we need to get on board with this, and we've got a KPI that we've got to tick around AI. Okay, but what is the governance around that, not just from a consumer perspective, but also from an employee perspective? How are we using our data intelligently, and how are we scaffolding a program in a way that the AI has got that true utility? Are we stress testing our hypotheses around the AI? AI is so powerful, and we're having so much fun. We're having so much fun just building on the fly and just prototyping. I can come up with an idea in 3 hours and have it built in 24 hours as a prototype. But then the question is to validate, well, is this useful, and should we build it? And if so, now let's refine it. But I could come up with 4 prototypes, and we could just be playful. We could do that. We can do that in a workshop, right? And you can get your whole team on board, and they can all prototype. They don't need to be the final builder, but they can all be involved. When people feel involved, and they can feel like they can just play with it and do silly things with it too. They don't always need to be making the end solution. Then we're really empowering people.
So then, if we look at this, both you and I have the great privilege of being involved with a variety of panels and different discussion workshops at the Future CX Summit.
Yeah.
If you look at this, I think the more that we get together, the more that we share ideas, the better the industry will learn from every one of our mistakes. So what you said, stop, listen, but also strong and wrong.
Yeah.
Because we've got to make sure that we do give ourselves that ability to fail and fail forward.
Yeah.
Now, I know that CCN, as I mentioned before, will be having more in-person panel meetings and peer sharing. Yeah. But for people who might want to get hold of you, Liz, what's the best way for them to get hold of you?
Well, I love a conversation, and I'm always open to a 15-minute chat. There's on our website, there's a 15-minute meeting, so long as you've put in a little bit of what you want to talk about in there. Obviously, LinkedIn is a good channel, and I do write some ramblings that predominantly do live on our website, but you can link through to there. So either our contact page or LinkedIn will be great. Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Well, Liz, on behalf of the Kiwi CX Collective podcast and CCN NZ, I'd like to thank you for your time here today and being one of our guests.
Thank you, Elias.